The People's Business is made possible by our partners, Solar Dynamics, the most efficient energy systems.
Good evening and welcome to the People's Business. I'm Wendy Burke. This evening we will be looking at Will the Charter Guide Our Future? We're looking at the Barbados Charter 2021. And to help me discuss this topic this evening are Senator Reverend Dr. John Rogers, Chereda Grannum, and Suleiman Bulbulia. All three of them are members of the Republic Status Transition Advisory Committee. Ms. Grannum will be joining us just a little bit later into the program. So welcome to you both, gentlemen. Now, first off, we'll be back after the break. I did just now. And we're back. I want to welcome now Ms. Grannum with us this afternoon, well, this evening. Now, we're looking at the Charter, and this is a document which has been causing a bit of consternation here and there as we move into our transition into a republic. Now, the Charter speaks of us, a people of Barbados, all of the rights, freedoms that we hold dear. It speaks about what we need to underscore, what we need to recognize, the areas we need to be unrelenting in, recognize, celebrate, recall, and embrace. And on the surface, these issues don't seem like bad things, but however, there are a number of people who have particular issues with the absence of certain words because the language does not use God. And Reverend Rogers, this is something that you were quite passionate about here recently on the floor of the Senate. Tell us briefly as to the rationale behind not using the word God, but using Creator.
When the Republic Status Transition Advisory Committee sat and decided that we needed to formulate a document that could trace what we have achieved in the past and where we are at this point in time and where we would like to be in the future, one of the stark things we concluded is that we do live in a society that is far different from 1966. In fact, in our last census, it was recognized that at least 19% of the population say that they're not affiliated to any religion, etc. The Charter, being not a justiciable document and being not enforceable either, was also a document we decided that all citizens of Barbados should be able to interact with and feel comfortable coming to. And one of the things we decided is let us start at the very basic core of human existence in acknowledging the one attribute of God that I believe all religions can ascribe to, and even non-religious people, whether they ascribe to it or not. To deny their origin in creation will be to deny their existence, as we believe. And so we decided, let us use the attribute of God, Creator, that speaks to the very core of every human being and also speaks to the equality and the justice and so on that we are seeking to build in this charter, because the charter is really about not only rights but our responsibilities to each other and to the state and the state to us. And
Okay.
so we thought that to be the best point of entry for all persons.
Okay, if we can take a quick look at Article 1, which looks at human rights and towards a just society. It speaks to all of us being born free, equal in human dignity, and against our background, regardless of age, race, ethnicity, gender, and sexual orientation. Now, this last term there, sexual orientation, has also been causing some eruption on our call-in programs and the press, etc. Could you tell me, Ms. Grannum, in terms of the inclusion of it in the charter, is because people are saying, oh, it's about same-sex marriages. What is it really about? What are we really saying to the people of our country here?
I think before I answer that, I need to answer some very fundamental questions that might have been glossed over earlier, and that speaks to the purpose of the charter in the first place, why we even need a charter. Now, we've established that the charter is a very powerful and symbolic document, even though, as my colleague, Senator Rogers, has reminded us that it is non-justiciable, but the charter is an expression of the best of us. It is a very ambitious and aspirational future-looking document that articulates what the best of us looks like. Now, while it doesn't find its power or its value in the law, it does find that the power has to come from the commitment or the willingness of people to participate in living the principles that are embodied in the charter. And I think that's very important to note. Another thing is when we would have been receiving the submissions, we applied the same assessment rubric to every submission. And I'll go through some of the key things that we maintained as we reviewed these submissions. The charter is not the domain or instrument of any one group or select groups. The rights-based ideals of respect, partnership, and diversity must be reflected in the intent and substance of the charter. The charter must not be used as an instrument of oppression or exclusion. And the charter must maintain the balance of rights, freedoms, and duties of citizen to state, and also state to citizen. Now, that being said, I think it is pretty obvious that when one says that it has to be reflective of all, that there's really no negotiation on what all should represent. And that article that you spoke to, Article 1, simply states that everyone, and we mean everyone when we say everyone, is equal in rights and dignity. It is very difficult to say that that is the type of Barbados we want when you want to negotiate what equality means. Equality means equality. It's non-negotiable. That is what equality means, everybody. So I find it very difficult to see how we could be truly representative of that and leave out sex, gender, and sexual orientation.
Understood. And also it speaks to diversity, and I guess to the inclusion of Mr. Bulbulia on the committee also ensures that all areas of our society, not just through the submissions that were made, but also in terms of the actual drafting, we ensure that everybody has a voice. What were for you, Suleiman, some of the areas that the members of your community were more hard-pressed on in terms of your voices being heard in this final document?
Well, thank you, Wendy, for having me here this evening with my fellow members of the committee. First of all, I don't see myself as being on the committee coming from any minority group or minority faith or minority ethnic group. I see myself as a Barbadian, participating fully in the discussions, and I'm part and parcel of bringing Barbados into being a republic. And my presence and my contribution on the committee was from that perspective, that all Barbadians, regardless of whether they're considered a minority or a majority, they have a voice and a stake in what Barbados becomes and what type of society we want. And so I was very happy to have been part of drafting this charter and putting in place these principles and these points that we have put here. And I'm really sorry that it went down a road that it should not have gone down, because this is a beautiful expression of where we want to be as a country going forward, especially for our younger generation. And I think that it is important that we look at the chart as a whole and not just take out parts of it and try to analyze why we have this and why we don't have that. I think we need to look at the chart as a whole document. And it's not just words, it should become a living reality for all Barbadians. What do we do with what we have put here in writing? And at the end of the day, all of us must share responsibility for the type of nation we want to build.
Okay. Now, in terms of what you've just said, all of us having access to the document, how is it that everyone will be able to access the document? I managed to access it because I have contact with persons on the transitionary committee, but where can all and sundry go to ensure that they can read this document for themselves and clear up some of the misconceptions which might be playing out there in their minds at this time?
Who would you like to address that, Wendy?
It doesn't matter, anybody can answer.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it.
Okay. Well, not too deep a stab, thank you.
Well, we'll see where it goes.
Yes.
The discussion draft of the charter would have been published in advance of the public consultations that we undertook, and the amended draft of the charter that was debated in the House of Assembly as well as the Senate would have been published on Barbados Parliament's website for quite some time. As I am also aware that it has been carried widely in the media, in mass media, in the traditional forms, print, radio, television, and various forms and manifestations. So it has been widely circulated, but I'm glad that you touched on whether people have read it. That is important. And I think that should be the basis from which you make a constructive critique or criticism. Please read it. Many people who have been criticizing have literally not read the document.
It's true. Yeah, because it's far more wide-reaching than most of us think. And I especially like the part where it speaks to us returning to some of those old-time values which we have in terms of being our brothers and sisters keeper, in terms of being responsible for our environment, understanding that we all have a role to play in the type of society that we wish to design for the future, you know, as opposed to just saying, well, I don't want this because I'm of that particular religious persuasion, or I'm this type, etc. We need to look at the document in and of itself, and the fact that it is not enshrined in law does not mean that it doesn't have teeth, it doesn't have weight, and that it doesn't have meaning. Yes? Now,
Yeah,
I believe we are approaching a commercial break. We'll take that break, and when we come back, we'll be opening up the phone lines so that people can hear firsthand from you all, the members of the committee, what we're dealing with and can have any of their queries sorted out. The People's Business will be back in a moment. And we're back. 228-5562, 228-5563, and we already have a caller on the line. Good evening to you. Good evening, caller.
Being in the charter, I must confess I did not read the whole. I read part one, which was in the nation. But one of the things think we need to underscore is discipline. And I wonder to what extent discipline was discussed by the group, and if it is in the charter, and where, and in what, pointing towards what future. Thank you.
Okay, did you all hear him? Oh,
No,
okay.
it was
He
a little
said
bit-
that he only read one part, which was printed in the Nation newspaper, and he wanted to find out about the issue of discipline and how it was dealt with in the charter, if it is included, and how we will deal with it going forward.
I think it is. I'll point to the article and let one of my colleagues into it in more detail.
Okay.
But
Suleiman or Roger, Senator Rogers?
I think the point has to be made here as well that the charter cannot have everything in it. So we have aspirational values and statements within the charter. A lot of what will happen in terms of specific items will be when the Constitution gets discussed. But I think if you have an aspirational statement like on the human rights and dignity and so on, more or less that will be captured in there, but we cannot put everything into the charter. If not, we would have had an encyclopedia rather than a few pages. But because a lot of people wanted a lot of things in this charter, but we couldn't get everything in here. But I think we do have aspirational statements. And I mean, under Article 1, we speak towards human rights and towards a just society and so on. So it is there, but not obviously perhaps in the specific language that a person may want it to be.
Okay, understood. Yes, you wanted to say something, Ms. Grannum?
Yeah, I do think that we captured the broad matter of discipline well under Article 2 and Article 3. Article 2, and I'll read it, states everyone in Barbados has a duty to care for each other and to ensure that our relationships are at all times characterized by courtesy, civility, and mutual respect. We remain conscious that every generation is indebted to the generations that preceded it and is morally obligated to the ones that follow. Under there are broader categories of respect, equitable development, and social partnership. Article 3 then moves on to speak to every Barbadian has the right and a duty to participate in the economic, political, and social life of Barbados as an expression of active citizenship. Every Barbadian has the right to vote and seek public office in accordance with the laws of this country. And it then goes on to speak to elements of democracy. And under there, actually is the word self-discipline captured there. We affirm principally by our own self-discipline and respect for the rule of law, support for our law enforcement agencies as they endeavor to rid our society of all crime, whether violence, human trafficking, illegal drugs, financial crimes, etc., etc., etc. So I'm not going to try to read out the entire 6 pages or 7 pages of the charter here, but I do encourage you to go and analyze it, to engage with it firsthand. And I'm sure you will see much more than the 2 concepts captured in 3 words that some persons would like to present in the sum total of.
Break away to hear what this person wants to find out. Good evening to you.
Hello, good evening. Hello?
Yes. Yes, good evening. Could you speak up for me?
Hello, am I on, ma'am?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Good. Okay, I just want to make the point that I'm a little bit taken back by Barbadians out there on calling programs on social media who are making an issue out of a charter. I mean, a couple of years ago, more than a couple of years ago, the corporate world decided that companies should have their own charters, their own mission statements. And what this is saying is that this is the mission statement of Barbados. This is a document that spells out things that Barbadians in total can line up behind. That is all it is. It doesn't have to be a legal document. It simply tells tells people this is who we are, this is how we should proceed, and this is how we should live. Indeed, a lot of the things that we may already be doing, we continue to do them if they're good things. And the things we are not doing, that we do them, okay?
Okay, sir. Thank you for your input.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Yes. Reverend Rogers, you were saying something?
No, I wasn't saying
Oh, I
anything.
thought you
do
wanted to
agree.
make a comment in terms of the whole discipline issue.
Well, I wasn't sure what aspect of discipline the caller was speaking about, whether he was talking about whether we said something about corporal punishment or anything like that. I wasn't
Oh,
sure.
okay.
what he said.
No, he just was looking at discipline in its broadest sense in terms of us as a
Well, I think-
society being more disciplined and so on.
I think Chereda captured that.
Yes, she did. Okay, now let's continue to look at the other aspects that have been included, and we speak to the social partnership. This is something which has been working and auguring well for our society since we started this whole tripartite arrangements and the whole lot of it. Things are a lot more peaceful, I would say, in terms of how the various sectors interrelate with each other. Now, was the inclusion of the social partnership one, in terms of the members of the social partnership, the unions, etc., how big a role did they play in your preliminary discussions and so on going into the actual scripting of this charter?
Well, I think what needs to be understood is that the level of consultation that was undertaken by the Republic Status Transition Advisory Committee was not solely for the purpose of the Charter. So there were a number of consultations across various public sector agencies and private sector representation, but that was generally around the nature of the Republic transition and any related elements. Of course, the Charter did feature in some of those discussions, but specifically with relation to the Charter, there was extensive consultation with the Social Justice Committee, which is perhaps one of the widest representative bodies in terms of diverse representation there is. There were a number of closed and public open sessions undertaken as well. Let me see if I can find a copy of them that I can just give you a good gauge of how much. Again, Social Justice Committee, we had multiple sessions. Burke, there were 5 or 6 of the live televised virtual town hall sessions. The Barbados Council for the Disabled, the Anglican Diocese, a number of private individuals who requested audiences with the committee to make representations as well. The LGBTQI community, and faith-based community. And so as you can hear, the consultation was wide and truly representative of the intent and the constituents of what a social partnership should look like.
Now, there's also Article 3, which looks at our participation in the economic, political, and social life. Now, this perhaps is one of the articles that I'm not hearing anybody debate about on the radio, TV, etc. I guess, could I take perhaps, Reverend Rogers, is because everyone is already saying they're active participants in this area, so therefore they don't need to be concerned about it in a charter?
Well, I believe that Barbados has one of the most stable political systems, perhaps in the region and perhaps the wider world, if we really look at it. And there is the scope for full participation of all persons already. What the Charter is saying is that this is good and we will continue, and we will even get better than we are at ensuring that all persons have right to exercise their franchise and to seek office in our country. In fact, the whole transition to the Republic is really saying to us that any Barbadian, even the little girl from a little village in St. Philip, can rise to the highest position, the highest office in this land. And we hold that as one of our sacred rights for all people.
Okay.
So it's really a reinforcement
Of what we already have. And I guess that's something too that people are not recognizing, that everything which is included in the charter is not necessarily new, but a lot of the things are reinforcements of what we already have enshrined in the present constitution, or are either in law or that we have just been doing automatically as a nation without anyone telling us that we have to, that we need to. So that's how it is going forward. Remember, our call number is 228-5562. And we have a caller on the line. Good evening to you. Okay, I guess that was dropped out. Good evening. Are you there?
Yes, hi, good evening. Let me just
Yes,
turn
good
this thing
evening.
down a bit, please.
Well, don't
Hello?
listen to your television. Just speak to us on the telephone.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, if I may, I'm permitted to digress a bit and to go back to Article number 1, dealing with the discrimination against age. Now, how do you relate that to the banks? Because here in Barbados, and just let me just say a bit about what happens to the people here, the older people. Now, we have people who are considered seniors, who perhaps lived overseas for a while, and their pensions and everything else come here and go into the bank. They work hard, they send the money here, and I'm sure they're still productive, they're still entrepreneurial, and when you go to the bank, and I believe this can affect production, of the country. You go to the bank and the bank tell you that you're too old, but you're not too old for them to take your money and perhaps lend it to other people. How do you relate that to the bank, and how do you reach the bank and get that deal with that matter?
Okay, he's speaking about age discrimination in terms of being able to access a loan, where over a certain age they may tell you you can't borrow beyond a particular amount, or you have to come and bring a co-signee, one of your children or somebody
Correct.
else who's of age, over 21, to sign on with you. He's asking
Well,
if, go ahead, Suleiman.
Chereda.
go ahead, Suleiman.
Oh.
Go ahead, Chereda, it's fine.
I was simply going to say that he or his generation are they're not alone in that. I think the banks are generally risk averse to new. We like to say that we're very supportive in the sense of entrepreneurial activity until it is time to put your money where your mouth is. And there's been quite a lot of debate recently around that and the need for banks to walk a little closer with us as it pertains to accessing capital and being able to realize dreams. Some people have very worthwhile dreams. I don't think that we should put a restriction in terms of who is allowed to dream or how big they're allowed to dream based on age or any other categorization. So I support you in that endeavor, but I'm not so sure how beyond lobbying for it and loudly, we can get the banks to pay a little more attention to that issue.
Okay, well, maybe they're listening. Let's go to a break and we'll be back in a moment. Any calls from online? Questions from online? What are they? And we're back. We're discussing, will the Charter guide our future? With me, I have the members of the Republic Status Transition Advisory Committee, Senator Reverend Dr. John Rogers, Chereda Grannum, and Suleiman Bulbulia. For those of us who are now joining us, call numbers 228-5562, 228-5563. Now, we also have those who are online tuning in as well with their questions. We have a caller on the line. Good evening to you.
Yes, good evening.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, good evening. I am paying some attention to the discussion, and there's some reflections. This, from my understanding, would be the second time that we've had a Barbados Charter. The first one was in 1652. And I'm just looking now at doing some research to see if this charter complements what happened in 1652. But there's one thing that I'm concerned about, and that is the right to vote. I know presently under the Constitution of Barbados, political parties are not represented in the House of Parliament. So therefore, when an individual go to vote or to cast their X, they are not voting for a political party. Though they think they are voting for, they are voting for an individual. Could someone explain if this would change in the new charter and the Constitution, please?
Would you like to take that, Senator Rogers?
Sure, I'll take a jab at it. That's a very good point you're raising, sir, and it has been a stickling point for many persons. I'm not sure if I'm still on. Am I still on?
You are still on. You are there.
Oh, it's a stickling point for many persons, and I should say that in the draft Constitution of 2004 and in the Fourth Commission report of 1998, that is one of the areas that they sought to address, at least at the level of the Senate, because it was suggested in that report that when we have an election, that the composition of the Senate should be changed to reflect the votes cast in the sense that if a party does not win a seat but get at least 10% of the votes, they can have two persons in the Senate to represent their interests. So there was a move towards addressing that in the Senate, but not necessarily in the House. But of course, the Charter, as we rightly said, is not the Constitution. And as the Prime Minister has indicated, there will be consultations next year to address matters such as what you're raising. And so I hope at that time you will raise these matters and we can have a public discussion on them.
Okay, we have another caller on the line. Good evening.
Good evening, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. My concern is that in this charter, as I listen to it, I noticed that the committee never saw it fit. And I want to know why they wouldn't have done that, where the nation has not been protected from the unfair practices of members of the legal fraternity from withholding clients' monies and wouldn't give it to them. And I wonder why the committee did not see it fit, seeing that they're talking about the protections and the development of people for Barbados and Barbadians. Why was this not considered to be put into it? Because we, and those members of the committee would have seen in the newspaper and on the news what had been taking place. And I wonder why these were not done, and if there's any intention from the committee after having these complaints and observations from us, the public, if they intend to put these things in the charter for the further development and protection of Barbadians. That is my question.
Chereda?
All of them.
Okay.
You threw a pretty hard question, Wendy.
Yes, yes. Because I'm saying we know the charter is not legal, but here he is wanting it to have teeth to protect him against the practitioners of the law. So I'm throwing it to you.
It's interesting. It is interesting. I was listening very, very carefully. And you are absolutely right that that is most definitely a matter for the legislators and certainly the Barbados Bar Association to tackle. But I do think that, it speaks to the broader matter of not being predatory and having a duty of care to one another and respecting one another. And those things certainly are captured in the charter. I think it needs to be very clearly understood that the charter is not intended to capture down to the last infinite detail, all of the various things or wrongdoings that are done in society, but it will capture them in some way in the broader context. And the idea is that we pay special attention to our relationships and our responsibilities to one another. And how we engage not only as individuals, but also across institutions and with the state. Those things are very important. So while the caller has raised a very valid point, and certainly that is an example of very predatory behavior, that's something that has to be dealt with in legislation.
Exactly. Because if you start with one profession, we can go to another and another and another in terms of their practices. And as Suleiman would have said before, we don't want an encyclopedia. It's meant to be a charter. Okay.
Exactly.
Pardon me?
Exactly. And I think one of the other points here is that these are ideals, these are aspirations that we all look forward to. I mean, and if you look at the language that we have used, you will recognize that it covers a whole gamut of different issues and persons who may not operate in the law. And when you read a sentence like "our progress should be defined by our duty of care to one another," I mean, that alone tells us what we should be aspiring to, what we should be doing with each other.
And the fact too that we speak to the plural pronoun of we and our.
Right.
And it always has to be collective. And that is something which I find generally in society people don't do. We always like to point the accusatory finger. And there are not many of us who take collective responsibility for things that happen. In your church, you have to, Senator Rogers, because all the parishioners are going to come to you. So you have to. Suleiman probably has to in his role. I'm not sure Chereda has to in her role too. But
Not at all.
right.
Luckily,
But for me as a journalist, and given the time I've had in it, if you flog one, you flog all for me. So if somebody says he or she did, I see it as a right to defend if it is defensible. And if it should be chided, I so do. Because we really do have to be each other's keepers, especially in as far as development is concerned. And I'll get back to that issue of development in the charter shortly. But we're going to go to the phone lines now. Good evening to you. Good evening. Hello? Just listen to your telephone and not the television. Good evening. Okay, there, that person seemed to have gone. Right. The charter speaks to development on a number of levels. Equitable development, development of the state, development of our economy, development of the environment in terms of how we nurture. And do our people understand their role truly as nurturers, Suleiman?
I think generally they do, but I think there's a need for a lot more re-education, refocusing, recommitment, um, looking at what we do currently within our society and what we need to do going forward. And we spent a lot of time on this because we felt that this is also very important. I mean, we know about the talk about environment and what's happening across the world and what is happening to small island developing states like ours. So we recognized that this was an important aspect of the charter that we needed to get in there. And we wanted every Barbadian to embrace this, understand what is happening, the environment that we want to build, and what we also not want to build for ourselves, but what we want to leave for our future generations, because what we do now will impact on them. So we wanted to reinforce that, and that's why this article is here, and it speaks to a number of things that we need to pay attention to. And we also spoke about rejuvenation, regeneration, building back what we have lost over the years within our environment, and we found this to be very, very important for us.
I know that's something you personally tend to push a lot in terms of the various advocacy movements you're affiliated with. Well, it's soon going to be time to go to break. I wish to remind you of our call numbers, 228-5562, 228-5563. On the People's Business today, we're discussing, will the Charter guide our future? We'll be back in a bit. Welcome back. And we have a caller on the line. Good evening to you.
Hello, good evening.
Yes, go ahead with your question.
All right. It's in relation to Article 1. I think that just needs a little bit of tidying up in relation to the criteria. It has got in relation to age, race, ethnicity, faith, class, cultural, educational background, ability. Some of these are very, very variable. The most significant one is sex or gender. So it really should start off in relation to sex, then age, which is also a variable. Race is very variable in ethnicity. But the one category which is different, which is more specific, is sex. That shouldn't come at the end. It should be number one in the set of criteria.
Committee members?
Well, actually, in the Constitution, it comes last.
Yes, it does. Go ahead, Chereda.
I was just going to add that we did not view these things in the sense of superlatives, meaning good, better, or best in terms of the ordering. So I think perhaps to get away from that type of thinking, maybe we could alphabetizing the order of things. But they're all equally relevant. That is my point. They're all equally relevant. So if placement is an issue, we can look at alphabetizing them.
Okay. Now, there was a message I received asking about the publication of the charter and if or how soon it would be available through the government printery.
I can't speak to that right now, but what I can commit to is speaking to the Cabinet Office and certainly sharing that information through you, Wendy, your viewers, and any of the other media houses that will want that information. It's an absolutely great question, and it should be a document accessible to all in as many spaces as possible. So I will get that information for you as soon as
Okay.
possible.
Thank you kindly. Okay, now we are continuing to look at the Charter. We've looked at the social partnership. We've looked at Article 3 with democracy and voting. Let's go on now to deal a bit more in depth with Article 4. We just glossed it over, but let's perhaps look at it in a little bit more detail. And it's talking about the healthy and balanced environment, preservation, conservation, enhancement, and regeneration. For too long, people have felt that this was the role of government and government only, especially through services like sanitation, the national conservation, etc. Everybody sees it more or less as government's role. You have one or two agencies or clubs that will participate in these things and try to keep these public spaces the way they should be. What more can we do, or how much harder can we push to get every Barbadian on board in this particular area, especially looking at what climate change is doing to all of us?
I'm really hoping Senator Rogers takes this question and speaks to the role of the church.
If I may,
in this regard.
this is an area which I'm very about, and one that the church has recognized more within the last few decades, and has placed a lot of emphasis on it. For example, in the Anglican Church, one of our marks of mission, the fifth mark of mission, is to safeguard the integrity of creation and to renew the life of the earth. And we also have infused within the Anglican, Roman Catholic, and Lutheran tradition a season of creation, which actually begins on September 1st, which is Creation Day, and runs down to October 4th, which is the feast of St. Francis of Assisi, the patron of ecology. And so we use that time to focus on issues such as are listed here in the Charter, because we recognize that it is a form of, I do not know if to say genocide, to leave a world that is depleted of those things necessary to sustain human life for generations to come. And so it is incumbent upon every individual in every generation to make sure that we seek to leave our planet better than we met it. And that's what we're trying to get here across the Barbadians, that we all have a duty, because what we do today can affect our children and their children's children when we're gone. And so we're at a form of abuse and perhaps even genocide, even before they're born.
That's an interesting perspective on it. Because, you see, most people think that when they do certain things, it's a small thing. I've broken coral, nothing big. I've decided I want to pull all of these plants out of the earth. It doesn't matter that those roots are holding the soil together and preventing slippage. We don't look at the interconnectedness of nature and it's bearing on us, but at the same time we expect to wake every day and find food which comes from the earth or from a tree, but we're doing nothing to protect said earth and said tree.
Yeah, and Wendy, if I may add to, I think Reverend Robert Rogers brilliantly captured it in his sermon today at the National Service of Thanksgiving. If we do not know where we came from, we do not know where we are going. And so this is an important point. Where were we years ago? We were in the land. We were making sure we were trying to live, trying to build up. Unfortunately, we have built up so much that, as you said, we expect someone else to do it for us, that we expect the cleanliness of our surroundings to be done by someone else, not by ourselves. We don't take responsibility for our actions. And so the person on the ZR van who throws the cup or the snack box container out through the window is not important. Someone will take care of that, but they don't recognize that that's going to end up in the sea and kill the fish. So these are the type of conversations that we need to have with our society, that where were we before and where are we today? What got us to this point, and what will happen for our future generations if we don't take care of our environment and take care of our surroundings? And I think these are the Charter. I hope that the Charter enforces us to do that, to have these conversations. That was the intent of this charter, to have the difficult conversations that we need to have. It forces us to look within ourselves, what is in our society, and have these conversations.
Okay, and another area of that particular part of the charter also speaks to us committing to the expression of our Barbadian culture and heritage. And this is one which gives me a lot of pain at times, because we are currently in November, still in November, but before November 1st, I was hearing Christmas music from October. Yes, I don't mind the Bajan Christmas songs where you're going to give me for Christmas and those types, but we still have Spooge, which for me is very much still one of the greatest musical art forms Barbados has produced, along with Tuk. And we still have all of our calypsos. We have artists we haven't heard in a while. In fact, today I was blown away when I heard Wendy Allen with a song letting us know that she's still here. And that spoke to me, because she was still the same clean voice that I grew up on as a child, and she's speaking to elements that have been happening culturally to try to erase the elements of her generation. And preservation of our culture is key, but it's been infiltrated over time. Yes, again, I have to take collective responsibility too, because being in mass media, it is something that we push whatever comes from the outside. So in terms of the charter and being able to place that authenticity and that love and that pride in the minds and hearts of our people, do you think that they're seeing that last paragraph there? That that people are actually going to say, yes, I can embrace this element of the charter?
Wendy, you keep throwing these very hard questions. We are already in a little bit of hot water for the use of some things, and you want us to debate whether they Christmas. But I will say that we say a lot of things. We say that we are a lot of things. We say we're kind, we say we're caring, we say we're progressive and respectful and tolerant. All the charter does is paint those expressions that we have made and claimed over time in words. All it does is paint that in words. Now, it is my sincere hope that in your everyday actions and choices, each of us as Barbadians can see ourselves reflected in these ideals that the Charter represents. Now, on the flip side, if you don't see these things, I think it would suggest that one needs to do a little bit of introspection and work. And I think that that is also a positive element of the Charter, because you don't get change or progress without a little bit of discomfort sometimes. Nothing good or worth having has ever come easy. So that is my response to that question.
It is very true.
Christmas.
Well, Bajans love Christmas. There's nothing wrong with it. You were saying something?
I don't want to touch the Christmas thing either, other than to say that this is one of the reasons why I argue that it was good to maintain our Independence Day on the same day when we transitioned to a republic, because I feared that if we had placed another national day anywhere in the year, November 30th will be a hard sell.
Yes.
Given what is happening in terms of the secularization of Christmas and so on. But on a more religious basis, we really shouldn't be playing any Christmas music until December 24th, because there's a 4-week season that comes before Christmas when we're called to focus on the 4 last things: death, judgment, heaven, or hell, which is the season of Advent. So technically, Christmas doesn't begin until December 24th.
It's true, but for Barbadians, it begins in October now. It's in October now. The other thing that the Charter speaks to, which we're seeing more and more every day, is the fact that Barbados is part of the global community. And the Prime Minister time and time again talks about us punching above our weight. And we have been seeing that as time goes on, and we have been engaging the world in various aspects of what we do. And the Charter speaks to some areas of cooperation, multilateralism, and regionalism. I don't know if maybe Chereda, you might want to expound on some of them a bit more.
Okay, well, I mean, and this ties very neatly in with the previous discussion around climate change and, you know, protecting the environment, etc. We've been very loud on the international stage about us being unfairly on the front lines of the worst effects of the climate crisis. And yet, we are also the smallest contributors to issues of you know, high carbon footprint and fossil fuel emissions and those kinds of things. And you know, it speaks to the whole nature of identity, the duality, the multifaceted nature of identity. It's not only how you see yourself, but also how others view you. So to speak to the first issue of why environmental protection and a healthy environment should matter to us, it is not very authentic or honest if we were there keeping all of this noise on the global platform when at home we are not doing the very things that we are demanding from the rest of the world. So that is one. In terms of engaging with the world, I think that that is very closely tied to our history and our experience of enslavement and colonialism, and understanding that people are people, and we cannot fight certain fights on our own. We are an island, certainly in terms of geographical reality, but this is an increasingly globalized environment. And you need friends, you need allies, and I don't think anyone has captured that the essence of that as well as, you know, the very excellent Errol Walton Barrow, our national hero. Friends of all and satellites of none.
Okay.
Precisely,
Yes.
and that to me is self-explanatory in terms of the way that we seek to engage with the world. And certainly, we connect with the African continent, reclaiming the Atlantic destiny that we would have been robbed of historically. That is critical to our international relations at this time as well.
Okay, we have to go to commercial break now, and when we come back, we'll be discussing more about the Charter and how it is going to be guiding our future. People's Business will return. Looking at the Charter. So if anyone wants to get in any last minute calls, now's your time to do so. 228-5562, 228-5563. And I want to speak to the members of the committee, the advisory committee, in terms of your roles and how you initially got engaged in it and why you found the time and the passion to commit to this process, because it was a long and arduous one. I'll start with Suleiman.
Oh, Wendy, a quick point first on the Engaging the World section I wanted to add to what Chereda said was that this is also grounded in making Barbadians global citizens. As we engage with the world, we want to ensure that we also recognize that we can be a global citizen. We can operate in Barbados or we can operate any part of the world if we choose to. And that was a point here as well, that we want to make Barbadians global citizens. I was invited by the Prime Minister to get involved with the Republican Status Transition Committee, and I was very happy to be part of the committee. As you know, what we are doing is historic. It is for Barbadians to embrace becoming a republic, and so I saw it as a sense of duty, and I delved into it with my full weight and my understanding the responsibility that I had, and I was very happy to share that committee with the others that were there and to make friends and to learn from them. I've learned a lot from the other members of the committee. And it's a historic moment for me and an opportunity for us to do something for our nation. And I was very happy to be there and to give back and to be part of the process.
Okay. And you, Reverend Senator Rogers?
All right. Before I give my experiences, let me acknowledge some other members of the committee, because this is a collaborative effort of everyone who sat on this committee. Yes, there was a subcommittee that prepared the charter, but the entire committee went over it and mulled over it for a long time. So the Most Honorable Patrick Forrest, Freedom of Barbados, Ambassador Lolita Applewhite, former Permanent Secretary Cecile Humphrey, Ms. Shirley Bell, Ms. Andrea Wake, who served as our secretary, Mr. Adrian Green, Ms. Cindy Marshall, Dr. Marilyn Williams, who chaired the entire committee, Cabinet Secretary Hugh Allman, and Professor Cynthia Barra-Giles, who came in towards the end to really help us to pull everything together. And of course, the other members here with me. And if I forgot anyone, I'm very sorry, but I feel that I needed to mention these persons because everyone brought something very special to what we have produced here as the charter, and I want to thank them all. And as Suleiman said, we've made friends. But my involvement, I was invited by the Prime Minister to share in this. And for me, I cannot repay Barbados for all that Barbados has done for me. And so anything to perform a civic duty for Barbados, I do not hesitate. And for me, this was just another opportunity to participate in the life and development of what I believe is one of the greatest democracies in the world. And so I give thanks to God for granting me the opportunity to have shared in this process.
Okay, and you, Chereda?
Thank you, Senator Rogers, for remembering to acknowledge our colleagues. Absolutely brilliant job they all did. Thank you. Well, I too, as was everyone else, invited to participate by the Prime Minister. I am a cultural and development strategist with a background in African and African diaspora studies and human rights advocacy. So none of this is much different from the work that I would have been engaged in on a day-to-day basis. And quite frankly, young people in this country are always calling for a seat at the table. So I think it would be obvious when you're offered a seat at the table to take it up and to come and perform a national duty to the best of one's ability. So I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to serve, and I will continue to do so in any other capacity that I can offer my assistance.
Okay. We have to go to, well, it's not yet time for a commercial break, but we'll have one coming up in a couple minutes or so. Now, everyone is carrying out their civic duty, and they feel as if they're obliged to do so because of what you believe the country has given you, whether it be free education, whether it be the chance to pursue your entrepreneurial goals, whatever it be. But the notion of civic mindedness, how present, how popular is it really? Do our youngsters especially really understand what it means to do national duty, do something for the civic good of all? Are they really concentrating on it, thinking about it. I mean, we have at university now where they have to give back hours because of the education. But outside of that, what percentage of them would really even care?
You know, Wendy, I'm not sure you phrased that question quite
Okay.
clearly.
Okay.
Because I wouldn't point to young people alone.
Well, sorry, not young ones only. There are older ones as well who say it's not for me to do. There's somebody being paid to do that type of thing. So let me not just look at them. Let me look at it as a concept in and of itself. How many of us really are keen on what I call giving back?
I think that Article 2, the conclusion of Article 2 seeks to capture that every generation is indebted to the ones that preceded it and morally obligated to the ones which follow. And that cuts across every facet of our lives, even in our work, productivity, in the willingness to do an honest day's work for an honest day's pay, the willingness to go above and beyond the call of duty for the sake of country, for the sake of national development. So it is not just participating in the things that do not provide any revenue for us, but actually in our work, in not stealing time. Because I don't think people realize that when you go to work and your work begins at 8:30 and you decide you're going to put your Bible on the desk to do devotions at 8:30, you're stealing time.
I'm glad you looked at the Bible.
No,
because you know some might say you're being honest with yourself.
I'm going to speak to myself first.
Yes.
I'm going to speak to myself first, you see, because I'm not going to accuse anybody else. But yes, you think you're doing devotions, but you're actually doing it on other people's time. Sometimes the government's time or your employer's time.
Precisely.
And so even those little things speak to civics and our willingness to do an honest day's work, to put in the time and to put in the effort necessary for national development.
We have a caller on the line. Let's see if we can get to them quickly before we go to commercial break. Good evening to you. Good evening. Listen to your telephone and not your television. Okay, that person has gone, so we've not been able to get to them. But I want to pick you back up on what you were saying, Senator Rogers, because that is indeed true. People don't see that as any form of wrongdoing because they figure, oh, sometimes I might give a little more, or I might be asked upon to do something that is not my role. But they don't ever see it as... Oh, okay, I think we have the caller back. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, go ahead, Coin, quickly, before we go to commercial break.
Yes. It's coming over to me as though we are trying to reinvent the wheel. And what I mean by that, we're talking about the creator as the heart of this whole thing, okay? I don't want to get in the part God creator yet. But just to think about the creator. I mean, if he is the creator and he is the creator, he must have laid down some ways for us to live. I don't think he waited till 2021 or even 16 something to decide how we should live as his creation. I think he would.
You find the charter unnecessary?
It's like reinventing the wheel. I mean, if he gave us a guideline and we now want to have our own, I think that's where we are running into some problems because ours don't always line up with his. So.
Okay. I don't know if you want to take this one from me, Suleiman.
I was going to ask Senator Rogers to take.
I know you would because he's the man of the cloth, but I believe you can handle it just as well.
The reality is that we have, yes, in our religious teachings, we have our scriptures, we have our rules, we have our regulations, and we follow those. We abide by those within our faith-based settings. But everyone else does not share that. what are the common things that we share? What are the common things as citizens of this country that we share that we can aspire to? And ultimately, it will perhaps come out of the same teachings that we have in our respective faiths. And even among those who may not have a faith, they may have their own understanding of what morality is and civic. So the reality is that we have put all that together into a document that all Barbadians can aspire to and look at. And I don't see a difficulty in having my faith teachings and abiding by them. And I see it reflected here, to be honest, in this charter. So the charter is intended for everyone. The charter is intended for all Barbadians to aspire to this, and it does not take away anything from my faith, from my understanding of my faith and my scriptures.
Okay, we have to go to commercial break now. When we return, we will have our last words from our panelists this evening, and we will wrap up things here on The People's Business. We'll be back. And we're back. Welcome back to our panelists and also to our viewers. I know we said we'd have our final takeaways, but I believe there's one last caller on the line. Good evening to you.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. I just want to ask that something be included in the charter for elderly persons, that when they are institutionalized in government institutions, that their pensions, are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you clearly.
That their pensions would not be given to their relatives anymore, because we've heard numerous stories of pensioners there in government institutions, and their relatives go collect the pensions and they don't even remember to carry nothing for those elderly persons. And time again we hear the story, but nothing is done. So I am hoping that with this new charter now, something will be done to put a stop to this, because if you're in a government institution, the government is maintaining you, then no pension should be given to relatives. That's all I really want to say, so good night.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure how we'll address that one going forward. Senator Rogers?
I would like to think that that is a very brilliant point being made, but it is not a matter for the Charter. The Charter is about the consciousness of our people and our understanding of being each other's keeper, and that would come in there. But what our sister may be speaking about is legislation, and I hope that she articulates this when we're talking about constitutional amendments and so on, because elder abuse is very rife in our country. And
it is.
That is one of the areas. People have worked hard, they've done everything, and when they're at that stage of their life, other people come and take their money and do not even look after them. And so perhaps something can be legislated to deal with that in terms of where the money goes and ensuring that some portion is used for the upkeep of that person.
Okay. Well, since we have you here, we'll get your final takeaways in terms of the Charter and it guiding our future.
Well, the Charter guiding our future is dependent upon us and our willingness to embrace it, our willingness to engage with it, even those things that are jarring to some of us, to recognize that what we're trying to do here is to build a Barbados that we can all live in and all experience respect and justice in, but also build a Barbados that can continue to place in the world stage and produce the type of global citizens that we already see emerging amongst our young people. So whether the charter will guide us is in our hands, and our willingness to engage with the document and use it to shape how we craft our legislation going forward to ensure that all people are taken care of in our country.
Okay, Chereda.
Final words. 3 quick things. The first thing is, please go and read the charter. It is a prerequisite to being able to make any kind of constructive criticism. That is one. The second thing is, I want to encourage those who seem to have a little bit of contention around the use of God versus Creator. Those who read the Bible, take a look, like I did, at Exodus 3:14. That speaks to when Moses came out of exile and spoke to God and questioned him about his name. And God answered, I am who I am. I will offer no further interpretation of that, and hope that those persons would go and review that section. And the last thing, Promise 3, I want to say that conflict doesn't come from differences inherently. Conflict comes from trying to create those superlatives, trying to say good, better, or best, or bad, worse, or worse, out of those differences. And when you try to paint those differences as superior or inferior, that is where you get conflict. Life is not a question of either ors. It is more than that, and we are more than that. There's beauty to be seen and to be taken from our diversity. Every one of us matters. That is a takeaway that I want you to have from my message today.
Thank you kindly. Your turn now, Suleiman.
Well, I want to repeat what Chereda said, is to go and read the charter, examine it, look at it, unpack it, and then it challenges us to reflect on ourselves. What is my role in Barbados? What is my role to building a better society? This is what this charter challenges us to do. And perhaps maybe examine its content and look for something that you can adopt and adapt and start to work with. I certainly took one of these things and I've started to work on it, and that is celebrating with gratitude the indigenous inhabitants of this island. And I made a vow that I will try to put the remembrance of the Arawak people that live here up front and center, and I began to do that, and I am seeing some progress in that regard. Take something from this charter and work with it, and let's start to build a better Barbados.
Yes, and that's what we all have to do to ensure that Barbados gets to be the developed and resilient nation that we all want it to be. I want to thank you for joining me this evening, our panelists, Senator Reverend Dr. John Rogers, Ms. Chereda Grannum, and Suleiman Bulbulia, all members of the Republic Status Transition Advisory Committee. You had your work cut out for you. There's still some way to go because we've not yet had our constitution, but we do have our charter in hand. Let's hope that all Barbadians do as the committees advise, and that's to get a hold of it and read it. I want to thank you very much for joining us. Again, apologies for our delayed start, but I thank you for staying with us and staying the course and participating fully in this evening's discussion. That's been The People's Business. I'm Wendy Burke. Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Have a great evening. And